The year was 1889, and in the sprawling territories of the American West, a woman's choices were as limited as her legal rights. Marriage was often her only escape route, even when marriage itself had become her prison. But sometimes, when desperation meets opportunity and courage finds an unlikely ally, impossible dreams have a way of becoming beautiful realities. Catherine Morrison had learned the hard way that not all men who spoke of love understood what the word truly meant. For 3 years, she'd been trapped in a marriage that had promised protection but delivered only fear. Bruises hidden beneath long sleeves and the slow erosion of everything she'd once believed about herself. But Catherine Morrison was about to die, at least on paper, and from her ashes would rise Kate Sullivan, a mail-order bride seeking a fresh start in Colorado territory, carrying nothing but forged documents, borrowed courage, and the desperate hope that somewhere in the vast wilderness, she might find a man who understood the difference between owning someone and loving them. Samuel Fletcher wasn't looking for a wife. The 32-year-old rancher had built his life around solitude and self-sufficiency, scarred by his own experience with a woman who'd chosen security over love, and left him standing at the altar with nothing but hard-learned lessons about the dangers of trusting someone else with your heart. What Sam Fletcher was looking for was peace, the kind that came from honest work, wide-open spaces, and the freedom to live life on his own terms. What he wasn't expecting was a mail-order bride who would challenge everything he thought he knew about marriage, freedom, and the courage it takes to start over when the whole world is watching. You're about to witness how a woman fleeing one kind of bondage would discover that true freedom doesn't come from finding the right master. It comes from finding someone who refuses to be your master at all. How a man who'd given up on love would learn that sometimes the most precious thing you can offer someone isn't your heart, but the space to heal their own. This is the story of Catherine Morrison, who disappeared into the wilderness to become Kate Sullivan, and discovered that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is trust a stranger with the truth. Of Samuel Fletcher, who thought he was helping a desperate woman escape her past, but ended up confronting his own fears about love, commitment, and the difference between protecting someone and setting them free. Neither of them expected that a business arrangement designed to avoid the complications of real marriage would become the foundation for the most honest relationship either had ever known. Neither imagined that freedom offered freely could be more binding than any legal document, or that love chosen daily was stronger than love demanded by law. Kate thought she was trading one form of dependence for another. Sam thought he was offering temporary sanctuary to a woman in trouble. What they discovered was that sometimes the most revolutionary act two people can commit is refusing to own each other while choosing to belong together anyway. In the Colorado territory of 1889, where a woman's worth was measured by her husband's success and a man's strength was judged by his ability to control his household, Kate Sullivan and Samuel Fletcher were about to prove that there was another way to build a life together. A way that began with honesty instead of deception, freedom instead of ownership, and the radical idea that love was something you gave, not something you took. Because when a woman who's been taught that marriage means surrender meets a man who believes that love means liberation, somebody's definition of partnership is going to change forever. And sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that begin with someone saying, "You don't have to belong to me. You just have to be free to choose me every single day." Sometimes a mail-order bride finds exactly what she's looking for, and sometimes she finds something infinitely better than what she thought she wanted. Sometimes freedom is the most romantic gift one person can give another. The bruise on Catherine Morrison's ribs was still tender as she folded her last decent dress into a worn carpet bag, her hands trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Outside her bedroom window, Boston's gaslights flickered like dying stars, and somewhere in the house below, her husband's heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floors. The same floors she'd once thought represented prosperity and security. 3 years ago, she'd married Richard Morrison, believing she was choosing love over uncertainty. At 19, orphaned and working as a seamstress for barely enough to survive, his proposal had seemed like salvation wrapped in silk and promises. Richard was older, established, respectable, everything a sensible woman should want in a husband. What she hadn't understood was that Richard Morrison collected beautiful things not to cherish them, but to control them. His wife was simply another acquisition, expected to be seen but not heard, ornamental but never independent, grateful but never questioning. The first time he'd struck her, Catherine had told herself it was an accident. Men of business carried stress, and sometimes that stress sought unfortunate outlets. She'd even believed his tears of remorse, his promises that it would never happen again, his gifts of jewelry that felt more like chains with each passing month. But accidents, Catherine had learned, had a way of becoming patterns, and patterns had a way of becoming prisons. "Catherine!" Richard's voice boomed from downstairs, carrying the edge that always preceded violence. "Where the hell is my dinner? I told you I'd be entertaining clients tonight." Catherine closed her eyes, steadying herself against the familiar jolt of fear. Tonight was different. Tonight, Catherine Morrison would cease to exist, and Kate Sullivan would board the westbound train with documents that proclaimed her a mail-order bride seeking a new life in Colorado territory. The forged papers had cost her nearly everything she'd managed to save from the household allowance Richard grudgingly provided. The contact had been a recommendation from Mrs. Henley, her former seamstress supervisor, who'd whispered about women who'd disappeared into new lives when the old ones became unbearable. "It's dangerous," Mrs. Henley had warned, "but staying might be more dangerous. And there are men out there, good men, who understand that a woman needs more than just a roof over her head." Kate, she corrected herself, practicing the new identity, tucked the precious documents into her bodice and picked up her bag. She'd written the letter to Samuel Fletcher, rancher of Fletcher's Rest in Colorado Territory, 3 weeks ago, answering his advertisement for a practical woman seeking a simple life and honest work. She'd been honest about wanting a new start and needing security. She'd been less honest about why she needed them. "Catherine!" The voice was closer now on the stairs. "Don't make me come up there." Kate moved quickly but quietly to the window she'd prepared earlier, blessing her childhood habit of climbing trees that had scandalized her governess, but now might save her life. The rope she'd fashioned from bed sheets was secured to the radiator, and though the drop to the garden below made her stomach lurch, it was infinitely preferable to facing Richard's wrath when he discovered she'd spent his money on frivolous independence. The window slid open with barely a whisper. Kate threw her bag down first, then swung her leg over the sill, her heart hammering against her ribs as she began her descent. The rope burned her palms and her traveling dress caught on the rough brick, but she forced herself to move steadily downward. She was 3 feet from the ground when she heard Richard's bellow of rage from her bedroom window above. "Catherine, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Kate dropped the remaining distance, landing hard enough to jar her teeth, but intact enough to grab her bag and run. Behind her, Richard's shouts grew more frantic, more furious, more desperate to maintain control over the possession that was escaping. "I'll find you!" he screamed into the night. "You can't hide from me forever. You're my wife." But Kate was already disappearing into Boston's maze of alleyways, moving toward the train station where the 1147 westbound would carry Kate Sullivan away from everything Catherine Morrison had endured and toward a future that, however uncertain, couldn't be worse than the prison she was leaving behind. The train station at night was a symphony of steam and steel, departing dreams and arriving hopes. Kate purchased her ticket with shaking hands, using the name on her forged documents, and found a seat in the least expensive car among other travelers seeking new lives in the territories. As the train pulled away from Boston, Kate pressed her face to the window and watched the city lights fade into darkness. Somewhere in that sprawling maze of respectability and hidden cruelties, Richard Morrison was probably discovering that his wife had taken nothing of value except herself. Let him search. Catherine Morrison was dead, buried somewhere between the bedroom window and the train platform. Kate Sullivan was alive, traveling toward Colorado territory with nothing but hope in the desperate faith that somewhere in the vast wilderness there existed a man who understood that a woman was more than property to be owned and displayed. The letter from Samuel Fletcher, carefully preserved in her reticule, was her only proof that such men existed. His response to her inquiry had been brief but encouraging. "Miss Sullivan, I appreciate honesty in all things and believe in fair dealing between honest folks." If you're looking for hard work and simple living, Fletcher's Rest might suit you. The mountains are peaceful, the work is rewarding, and a woman who can stand on her own feet will find respect here. It wasn't a love letter, but it was something Kate valued more highly than poetry. It was respect, offered before they'd even met. As the train rocked through the night, Kate allowed herself to imagine what Samuel Fletcher might be like. Would he be gentle or stern, handsome or plain, kind or merely practical? The advertisement had mentioned that he was a widower, that he ran cattle and horses, that he valued independence and hard work above social pretensions. Most importantly, he'd specified that he was looking for a partner in building a life, not a decoration for someone else's success. Kate dozed fitfully as the train carried her west, her dreams filled with wide-open spaces and men who kept their promises, who spoke honestly and touched gently, who understood that strength meant protecting rather than controlling. When she woke, the sun was rising over landscapes more vast and empty than anything she'd ever imagined. The mountains in the distance looked like sleeping giants, and the sky stretched endlessly in shades of golden blue that made her heart expand with something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. In 6 hours, she would arrive in Cedar Creek, Colorado territory. Samuel Fletcher would be waiting, or he wouldn't. He might be everything his letter suggested, or he might be another version of the disappointment she was fleeing. But for the first time in 3 years, Kate Sullivan was traveling towards something instead of running from it. For the first time since her wedding day, she was making a choice that belonged entirely to her. Whatever waited in Colorado territory, it would be her choice to face it. And after 3 years of having every choice made for her, that freedom felt more precious than all the security she was leaving behind. The train rolled on, carrying Kate toward her future, toward Samuel Fletcher, toward the possibility that sometimes when you lose everything you thought you wanted, you discover what you actually need. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is jump out a window and climb aboard the first train to anywhere else. Sometimes mail-order brides find exactly what they're looking for, and sometimes they find something infinitely better. The train wheezed to a stop at Cedar Creek Station with a final blast of steam that seemed to announce Kate's arrival to the entire Colorado territory. Through the grimy window, she could see a collection of wooden buildings scattered across a valley floor, dwarfed by mountains that rose like ancient cathedrals into the crystalline sky. Kate gathered her carpet bag and the small bundle of personal items that represented everything she now owned, her heart hammering with nervous anticipation. Somewhere on that platform, Samuel Fletcher was waiting, or so she hoped. Their correspondence had been limited to practical arrangements: her arrival time, his physical description, tall, dark hair, usually wearing a black hat, and his promise to meet the 2:30 westbound. As she stepped onto the platform, Kate felt overwhelmed by the sheer vastness of the landscape. Boston had been all buildings and boundaries, contained spaces where a person knew exactly where they stood. This place seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions, as if the very concept of limitation had been swallowed by the sky. "Miss Sullivan?" Kate turned toward the voice and felt her breath catch. Samuel Fletcher was indeed tall, easily 6 feet, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that spoke of years spent outdoors. His dark hair needed cutting, and his clothes were practical rather than fashionable, but there was something in his blue eyes, a steadiness, a quiet strength that made her feel safer than she had in months. "Mr. Fletcher," she replied, offering a nervous smile, "thank you for meeting me." Sam studied her face with the careful attention of a man who'd learned to read character quickly and accurately. Kate tried not to flinch under his scrutiny, wondering what he saw, the carefully hidden fear, the bruises that makeup couldn't entirely conceal, the desperate hope she was trying so hard to contain. "You look tired," he said finally, his voice gentle rather than accusatory. "Long journey?" "Very long," Kate admitted, surprised by his perceptiveness. "But I'm grateful to be here." Sam nodded and reached for her bag. "Let's get you settled. Then we can talk about arrangements." As they walked toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 well-cared-for horses, Kate found herself stealing glances at her intended husband. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, but there was something guarded about him too. a wariness that suggested his own experiences with disappointment. "The ranch is about an hour's ride," Sam said as he helped her onto the wagon seat. "Road's decent this time of year. You can tell me about yourself during the drive." Kate's stomach clenched. This was the moment she'd been dreading, the need to construct a believable history for Kate Sullivan while bearing the truth about Catherine Morrison so deeply it could never surface. "I'm from back east," she began carefully. "Lost my family to fever. Worked as a seamstress until circumstances made it necessary to seek new opportunities." Sam glanced at her as he guided the horses out of town. "What kind of circumstances?" The question was asked gently, but Kate heard the undertone of concern. She'd prepared for this moment, but sitting beside this man who radiated quiet strength, she found herself wanting to tell him the truth. Instead, she fell back on the story she'd rehearsed. Financial difficulties. The city became unwelcoming to a woman on her own. It wasn't entirely a lie. Richard's control over their finances had made independence impossible, and Boston's society had indeed been unwelcoming to any woman who dared question her husband's authority. Sam was quiet for a long moment, his attention apparently focused on the mountain road ahead. Finally, he spoke. "Miss Sullivan, I'm going to ask you something, and I'd appreciate an honest answer. Are you running from something or toward something?" Kate felt her carefully constructed composure crack. What do you mean?" "I mean you've got the look of someone who's been hurt, and hurt bad. The way you hold yourself, the way you flinch when I move too quickly, the fact that you're watching the road behind us like you expect pursuit." Sam's voice was matter-of-fact, not accusatory. "Now, I'm not judging. We've all got things we'd rather leave buried. But if you're in some kind of trouble, I need to know what I'm getting into." Kate stared at him, stunned by his directness and terrified by his perceptiveness. I don't know what you're suggesting. I'm suggesting that Kate Sullivan is probably not the name you were born with, and that whoever hurt you might not be as far behind as you'd like to believe." The words hung in the mountain air like a challenge. Kate felt tears sting her eyes, tears of fear, relief, and something that might have been hope. Here was a man who saw through her deception, but didn't seem angry about it. Instead, he seemed concerned. "What if I am running?" she whispered. "What if everything I told you in my letters was a lie?" Sam brought the wagon to a stop beside a creek that sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. He turned to face her fully, his blue eyes serious but not unkind. "Then I'd say you're probably running for good reason, and whoever you're running from probably deserves to lose you." Kate felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "You're not angry that I deceived you?" "Honey, I've been deceived by experts. What you've done isn't deception, it's survival. There's a difference." The endearment, spoken so naturally, made Kate's throat tighten with emotion. When was the last time someone had called her honey without meaning to diminish or possess her? Sam continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Now I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer." "What kind of offer?" "The kind that might solve both our problems." Sam leaned back against the wagon seat, his manner relaxed but his eyes intense. "See, I advertised for a mail-order bride because I needed someone to help with the ranch, and because this community expects a man my age to be married. But the truth is, I'm not particularly interested in marriage as most people understand it." Kate frowned, confused. "I don't understand." "I'm talking about a partnership instead of a marriage. A business arrangement that gives you legal protection and social respectability while giving me the appearance of conventional domesticity." Sam's voice grew warmer. "You'd have your own space, your own independence, your own income from the ranch work. No expectations beyond mutual respect and practical cooperation." Kate stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You're suggesting we not have a real marriage?" "I'm suggesting we have a better kind of marriage. One based on choice instead of obligation, respect instead of ownership." Sam's smile was gentle but serious. "You'd be Kate Fletcher in name, with all the legal protections that provides. But you'd be your own woman, in fact, with the freedom to make your own decisions about your own life. And you? What would you get from such an arrangement? Peace, companionship when I want it, solitude when I need it, someone to share the work and the profits, someone to trust with the parts of my life that matter." Sam paused. "And the satisfaction of knowing I helped someone who needed helping, the way I wish someone had helped me when I needed it most." Kate felt tears spill over despite her efforts to contain them. "Why would you do this for a stranger? How do you know I'm worth such kindness?" Sam reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "Because you had the courage to jump out a window and climb onto a train to nowhere, carrying nothing but hope and a made-up name. Because you're sitting here crying not because you're afraid of me, but because you can't quite believe someone might actually want to help you." He withdrew his hand and settled back into his seat. "And because I know what it's like to need a second chance and to be afraid that second chances don't exist for people like us." Kate looked at this man who was offering her something she'd never dared dream of: freedom wrapped in safety, independence with companionship, respect without possession. It seemed too good to be true, which probably meant it was. "What's the catch?" she asked quietly. Sam's laugh was warm and genuine. "The catch is that you'd have to live with a stubborn rancher who talks to his horses more than his neighbors, who burns coffee more often than he makes it properly, and who has absolutely no idea how to navigate the social complexities of having a wife who isn't actually a wife. And I'd have to trust that you mean what you're saying, that you won't change your mind once I'm legally bound to you." "You would," Sam agreed, "just like I'd have to trust that you won't disappear in the night when whoever you're running from catches up, or when you decide that freedom isn't worth the complications of living with a man who snores and leaves his boots where they don't belong." They looked at each other across the wagon seat, two wounded people recognizing something familiar in each other's careful hopefulness. "Kate Sullivan," Sam said formally, "would you do me the honor of becoming my partner in the most unconventional marriage Colorado territory has ever seen?" Kate felt laughter bubble up from somewhere deep inside. Real laughter, the kind she'd forgotten she was capable of. "Samuel Fletcher, I thought you'd never ask." As their wagon rolled toward Fletcher's Rest with the late afternoon sun painting the mountains gold, Kate realized she wasn't just traveling toward marriage. She was traveling toward the first real choice she'd been free to make in years. And for the first time since climbing out that Boston window, she was genuinely excited to discover what that choice might bring. Fletcher's Rest took Kate's breath away. The ranch house sat in a natural clearing surrounded by towering pines, with mountains rising like protective walls on all sides. It was modest but well built, with a wide porch that seemed designed for watching sunsets and a garden that spoke of someone who understood the value of growing things. "It's beautiful," Kate said as Sam helped her down from the wagon. "It's home," Sam replied simply. "Or it will be if you decide to stay." Their wedding ceremony 3 days later was the strangest Kate had ever witnessed, probably the strangest Cedar Creek had ever witnessed too. Reverend Thompson seemed confused by their request for a partnership ceremony rather than traditional vows, but Sam's reputation in the community carried enough weight to overcome any objections. "Do you, Samuel, take Kate to be your partner in all things, to respect her independence while offering your protection, to share your life while honoring her freedom?" "I do." "And do you, Kate, take Samuel to be your partner in all things, to share his burdens while maintaining your autonomy, to build a life together while remaining true to yourself?" Kate looked into Sam's steady blue eyes and felt something she'd never experienced before: the confidence of making a choice she actually wanted to make. "I do." The kiss that sealed their partnership was gentle, brief, and felt more like a handshake between equals than a claim of ownership. Kate had never been kissed with so much respect and so little demand. That night, Sam showed her to the room he'd prepared, a spacious bedroom with its own entrance, comfortable furnishings, and a lock on the inside of the door. "Your space," he said simply. "No one enters without your permission, not even me." Kate stood in the doorway of her sanctuary, overwhelmed by the reality of privacy she controlled. "What if someone asked questions about our arrangements? Then we tell them it's none of their business how a husband and wife organize their private life." Sam's smile was gentle but firm. "Kate, you're free here. Free to work or rest, free to speak or be silent, free to be in my company or avoid it entirely. The only thing you're not free to do is doubt that this freedom is real." Over the following weeks, Kate began to understand what Sam had meant. She woke when she chose, worked at tasks that interested her, and spent her evenings reading books from Sam's surprisingly extensive library or simply sitting on the porch watching the mountains change color in the fading light. Sam was exactly the partner he'd promised to be. He showed her the ranch operations without condescension, listened to her suggestions without dismissing them, and treated her contributions as valuable rather than amusing. When she proved adept at managing the books, he turned the finances over to her completely. When she redesigned the garden layout for better efficiency, he implemented her changes without question. Most remarkably, he never once tried to touch her without permission, enter her room without invitation, or make decisions for her without consultation. "You're different than I expected," Kate told him one evening, as they sat on the porch after a day of repairing fence lines together. "Different how? You actually meant what you said about partnership. Most men say they want a partner, but really want a subordinate who agrees with them." Sam was quiet for a moment, studying the sunset. "I was engaged once about 5 years ago. Woman named Elizabeth from Denver. Beautiful, educated, everything a man's supposed to want in a wife." Kate felt an unexpected pang of something that might have been jealousy. "What happened?" "She married my business partner instead. Said I was too independent, too unwilling to make her the center of my world. Said she needed a man who would put her before everything else, including his own judgment." Sam's smile was rueful. Turned out she was right about what she needed. She and Thomas are happy together. He adores having someone to make decisions for. "And you learned you weren't built for that kind of marriage." "I learned that love based on surrender isn't love. It's ownership with pretty words wrapped around it." Sam looked at her directly. "Real love gives the other person room to be themselves. Everything else is just elaborate selfishness." Kate felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "Is that what this is? Love?" Sam considered the question seriously. "I don't know yet, but I know it's the foundation love could grow from if we both choose to let it." That night, for the first time since her arrival, Kate didn't lock her bedroom door. Not because she felt pressured to invite Sam in, but because she finally felt safe enough to choose vulnerability instead of having it forced upon her. From her window, she could see Sam reading on the porch by lamplight, giving her the space he'd promised while remaining close enough to offer protection if she needed it. Kate Fletcher, and she was beginning to think of herself by that name, fell asleep to the sound of mountain wind and the revolutionary feeling of being exactly where she chose to be. For the first time in years, her dreams were peaceful. She was learning that freedom didn't mean being alone. It meant being with someone who loved her enough to let her be free. And that, she was discovering, made all the difference in the world. Kate had been living at Fletcher's Rest for 6 weeks when the nightmares returned. She woke gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs, the phantom sensation of Richard's hands around her throat so vivid she could still feel his fingers pressing against her windpipe. Outside her window, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The beauty should have calmed her, but instead it felt fragile, as if something dark was preparing to shatter the peace she'd found in this mountain sanctuary. "Kate?" Sam's voice came through her door, concerned but respectful. "You all right in there?" She realized she must have cried out in her sleep. "I'm fine," she called back, though her voice shook with residual terror. "No, you're not. I'm making coffee. Come out when you're ready." Kate dressed with shaking hands, trying to banish the dream images that clung to her consciousness like smoke. For weeks, she'd almost forgotten about Richard Morrison, almost convinced herself that Catherine Morrison had died so completely that her husband would never think to look for Kate Fletcher. But dreams had a way of reminding you that the past never stayed buried as deeply as you hoped. Sam was waiting on the porch with 2 cups of coffee and the kind of patient expression that invited confidences without demanding them. He'd learned to read her moods with uncanny accuracy, offering comfort when she needed it and space when she preferred solitude. "Bad dream?" he asked as she settled into the chair beside him. Kate nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Sometimes I think I'm safe, and then something reminds me that safe is probably an illusion." "Want to talk about it?" Kate looked at him, this man who'd given her more genuine security in 6 weeks than she'd known in 3 years of marriage, and felt the familiar war between honesty and self-protection. Sam, what would you do if someone from my past showed up here? Someone who might not accept that Catherine Morrison is dead and Kate Fletcher is beyond their reach? Sam's expression grew serious. I'd make sure they understood that Kate Fletcher is under my protection and that anyone who threatens her will have to go through me first. Even if that person had legal rights? Even if they could prove that our marriage was built on deception? Especially then. Sam set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. Kate, I don't care what name you were born with, what mistakes you made before you got here, or what legal documents someone might wave around. You're my partner now, and I protect what's mine. The word mine should have terrified her. It was the same word Richard had used to justify his control. But when Sam said it, it felt like a shield rather than a chain. You say that now, but... Kate. Sam's voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. She met his eyes, seeing something there that made her chest tight with emotions she wasn't ready to name. I've seen how you flinch when men move too quickly. I've noticed how you check the locks twice before bed, and how you position yourself near exits in crowds. I know someone hurt you badly enough that you'd rather risk everything on a stranger than stay where you were. His voice grew quieter. And I know that whoever did that to you probably thinks he owns you. Kate felt tears sting her eyes. Sam, he doesn't. You belong to yourself now, and you chose to share that belonging with me. That's not something anyone can take away, no matter what papers they carry or what legal arguments they make. Before Kate could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both turn toward the road. A single rider was coming up the mountain trail, moving with the determined pace of someone who knew exactly where he was going. Kate's blood turned to ice. Even at a distance, she recognized the set of those shoulders, the arrogant way the man sat his horse. Richard Morrison had found her. Kate? Sam's voice seemed to come from very far away. Who is that? My husband, she whispered, the word tasting like ashes in her mouth. My real husband. Sam was on his feet instantly, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle he kept by the door. Stay behind me. But Kate was already rising, her spine straightening with a defiance that surprised her. This is my fight, Sam. I won't hide behind you like some helpless victim. The hell you won't. He's already hurt you once. And he'll keep hurting me as long as I let fear control my choices. Kate moved to stand beside Sam rather than behind him. I'm not Catherine Morrison anymore. I'm Kate Fletcher, and Kate Fletcher doesn't run from bullies. Richard rode into the yard with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never doubted his right to take whatever he wanted. He was exactly as Kate remembered, handsome in a cold, calculated way, expensively dressed despite the long journey, radiating the kind of entitlement that came from never being told no. Catherine, he said as he dismounted, his voice carrying the same false gentleness that had once fooled her into thinking he loved her. You've led me quite a chase, darling. Time to come home now. My name is Kate Fletcher, she replied, amazed by the steadiness of her own voice. And I am home. Richard's eyes flicked to Sam, dismissing him as irrelevant. Catherine, stop this foolishness. You're my wife, legally and morally. Whatever game you've been playing with this rustic is over. Sam stepped forward, his presence suddenly radiating the kind of quiet menace that made dangerous men pause. The lady says her name is Kate Fletcher. I suggest you use it. Richard laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The lady is my property, legally speaking. She can call herself whatever she likes, but the law is quite clear about a man's rights regarding his runaway wife. Not in Colorado territory, Sam replied evenly. Here, a woman has the right to choose her own life. And Kate chose me. Did she tell you she was already married when she chose you? Did she mention that your entire relationship is built on lies and fraud? Richard's smile was venomous. I have documentation proving that Catherine Morrison is my legal wife, which makes her marriage to you invalid and her entire identity here a criminal deception. Kate felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Everything Richard was saying was legally true. Her marriage to Sam was indeed invalid. Her new identity was fraudulent, and in the eyes of the law, she was still Richard's property. But then Sam spoke, his voice calm as steel. Funny thing about the law out here, Morrison, it tends to favor the people who actually live by it. Now, I don't know what you did to make Kate desperate enough to risk everything on a new life, but I know it was bad enough that she'd rather die than go back to it. Richard's composure cracked slightly. You don't understand the situation. I understand that you're standing on my property, threatening my wife, and wearing out your welcome real fast. Sam's hand moved closer to his gun. I understand that Kate Fletcher is a free woman who makes her own choices, and I understand that you've got about 30 seconds to get back on that horse and ride out of here before I decide you're trespassing. This isn't over, Catherine, Richard snarled, his mask of civility finally slipping completely. I'll be back with the law, with proper documentation. You can't hide from your legal obligations forever. Maybe not, Kate said, finding her voice again, but I can fight them with someone who believes I'm worth fighting for. As Richard mounted his horse and rode away, his parting words carried clearly on the mountain air. Enjoy your little fantasy while it lasts, Catherine. I'll be back, and when I am, your cowboy protector won't be enough to save you. Sam watched until Richard disappeared down the mountain trail, then turned to Kate. She was trembling, but her chin was raised in defiance. So, Sam said quietly, Mrs. Morrison, want to tell me what we're really dealing with? Kate looked into his eyes and saw no condemnation, no betrayal, only the steady resolve of a man preparing for battle. Yes, she said, I think it's time you knew everything. For the first time since Richard's departure, she smiled, because whatever legal rights her first husband might claim, she'd just discovered something more powerful than any law. A man who was willing to fight for her freedom, even knowing the fight might cost him everything. And that, Kate realized, was worth any risk. Kate told Sam everything. Sitting on their porch as the sun climbed over the mountains, she laid bare 3 years of marriage that had been more prison than partnership. The gradual erosion of her independence, the escalating violence, the final desperate escape through a bedroom window. Sam listened without interruption, his jaw growing tighter with each revelation. When she finished, silence settled between them like dust after a storm. He'll be back, Sam said finally, probably with the sheriff and whatever legal documents he can manufacture to support his claim. I know. Kate's voice was steadier than she felt. Sam, you could still walk away from this. Claim you were deceived, that the marriage was invalid from the beginning. No one would blame you. Sam turned to look at her with an expression that made her heart skip. Kate Fletcher, if you think I'm walking away from you now, you don't know me at all. But the legal complications are my problem now. You're my wife in every way that matters, and I don't abandon family when things get difficult. The word family hit Kate like a physical blow. Sam, we barely know each other. We've been married 6 weeks based on false pretenses. You don't owe me. I owe you everything, Sam interrupted. You want to know why I advertised for a mail-order bride instead of courting someone local? Because I was tired of being alone, but I was scared of being owned. You gave me partnership without possession, companionship without chains. You think I'm going to let some bastard from Boston destroy that? Before Kate could respond, the sound of approaching horses echoed up the mountain trail. Multiple riders this time. Richard had returned with reinforcements. Stay close to me, Sam said, checking his rifle. But don't hide. We face this together. Richard rode into the yard flanked by Sheriff Coleman and 2 deputies, his satisfaction obvious as he dismounted. Catherine, I've returned as promised, with proper legal authority this time. Sheriff Coleman, a weathered man Kate had met briefly in town, looked uncomfortable with his mission. Mrs. Fletcher, I'm sorry about this, but Mr. Morrison has presented documentation that you're legally his wife. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to accompany him back to town for sorting this out. Sam stepped forward. Sheriff, with respect, Kate Fletcher is a legal resident of Colorado Territory. She's committed no crime here, and she's under my protection. The crime is bigamy, Richard said smoothly. She married you while still legally bound to me. That's a felony in any territory. The marriage was performed in good faith, Sam replied. If there was deception, it was practiced on both of us. Richard's smile was cold. Nevertheless, Catherine belongs with her lawful husband. Sheriff, I trust you'll enforce the law impartially. Kate felt the old fear rising in her throat, the helplessness of being discussed like property by men who would decide her fate without consulting her wishes. But then Sam's hand found hers, warm and steady, and she remembered who she'd become. Sheriff Coleman, Kate said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. I request the right to speak on my own behalf. Catherine, you'll remain silent, Richard began. My name is Kate Fletcher, she interrupted, her voice growing stronger. And in Colorado territory, I believe women have the right to testimony in legal proceedings. Sheriff Coleman nodded reluctantly. That's true, ma'am. What do you want to say? Kate looked at Richard, the man who'd controlled her through violence and intimidation, and felt the last of her fear transform into righteous anger. I want to say that Richard Morrison forfeited any claim to being my husband the first time he struck me. That a man who uses his fists to win arguments isn't a husband, he's a captor, and that I would rather die free than live as his property. Richard's facade of civility cracked. You ungrateful little... I want to say, Kate continued, her voice rising over his, that Samuel Fletcher has shown me more respect in 6 weeks than Richard Morrison showed me in 3 years. That he's never raised his hand to me, never threatened me, never tried to control my thoughts or actions. She turned to face the sheriff directly. Most importantly, I want to say that if the law requires me to return to a man who beat me bloody for the crime of wanting to be treated as a human being, then the law is wrong. Sheriff Coleman shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Fletcher, the law is the law. I can't ignore valid documentation because of personal grievances. Even when those grievances include attempted murder, Sam asked quietly. Richard went pale. That's a lie. Is it? Sam's voice was deadly calm. Kate, show them your ribs. Kate hesitated for only a moment before unbuttoning the top of her dress enough to reveal the yellowed bruises that still marked her ribcage. Bruises from Richard's final, most vicious attack. I was unconscious for 3 hours, Kate said steadily. When I woke up, Richard was telling the servants I'd fallen down the stairs. The doctor he called said another blow like that might have killed me. Sheriff Coleman stared at the evidence of Richard's brutality, his expression growing grim. Mr. Morrison, is this true? My wife was difficult. Occasionally discipline was necessary to maintain proper order in my household. Discipline? Sam's voice was lethal. You call beating a woman unconscious discipline? What happens between a man and his wife is private, not when it's attempted murder. Sam moved closer to Richard, and Kate saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. You want to discuss discipline, Morrison? Let's discuss what happens to men who hurt women under my protection. Sam, Sheriff Coleman warned, but his heart didn't seem to be in it. Richard, sensing the mood shifting against him, played his final card. Sheriff, I demand you arrest this woman for bigamy and fraud. The law is clear. Sheriff Coleman looked from Richard to Kate to Sam, clearly wrestling with competing obligations. The law is clear, he agreed finally, but so is the evidence of abuse. In Colorado territory, we've got provisions for situations like this. What kind of provisions? Kate asked. Annulment proceedings. If we can prove the original marriage was obtained through coercion or maintained through violence, the territorial court can declare it invalid. Coleman's expression grew more confident. Of course, that would require testimony from witnesses, medical evidence, documentation of abuse patterns. Kate felt hope flutter in her chest. I kept a diary, hidden in my room back in Boston. It documents every incident, every threat. Convenient, Richard sneered. Alleged evidence that happens to be 1,000 miles away. Not alleged, said a new voice from the edge of the yard. Documented and witnessed. Everyone turned to see a small, neat woman riding up the trail on a sturdy mare. Kate gasped with recognition. Mrs. Henley? Her former supervisor dismounted with brisk efficiency. Hello, Catherine. Or should I say Kate? I prefer Kate, personally. It suits you better. What are you doing here? Richard demanded. Testifying, Mrs. Henley replied calmly. See, after Kate disappeared, I got curious about why a young woman would risk everything to escape her marriage. So I started asking questions around your Boston neighborhood, Mr. Morrison. Amazing what servants will tell you when they're not afraid of losing their positions. She opened her saddlebag and withdrew a thick folder. I've got sworn statements from your cook, your housekeeper, and 2 neighbors who witnessed your wife fleeing through a window with injuries consistent with violent assault. I've also got her diary, which she asked me to retrieve if anything happened to her. Richard's face had gone ashen. You had no right. I had every right to help a woman escape an abusive marriage, and I had the resources to track her down and make sure she stayed safe. Mrs. Henley smiled grimly. Turns out private investigators are quite affordable when you're motivated to see justice done. Sheriff Coleman examined the documents with growing interest. This is substantial evidence of systematic abuse, more than enough to begin annulment proceedings. Furthermore, Mrs. Henley continued, I've discovered that Mr. Morrison has significant gambling debts in Boston. Debts that would be satisfied by his wife's inheritance. Inheritance that becomes his property only as long as she remains married to him. Kate stared at her savior. You came all this way to help me? I came all this way to make sure that bastard didn't drag you back to hell, Mrs. Henley replied firmly. No woman should have to choose between marriage and survival. Richard, seeing his legal position crumbling, made one last desperate play. He lunged toward Kate, his hand reaching for the gun at his hip. If I can't have you, no one can. He never finished the sentence. Sam's fist connected with Richard's jaw with a sound like breaking wood, dropping him to the ground before his weapon cleared its holster. Stay down, Sam advised, his voice conversational, despite the violence of his actions. Next time I won't be so gentle. Sheriff Coleman shook his head. Well, I'd say that settles the question of who's the better man for Mrs. Fletcher. He turned to his deputies. Arrest Morrison for attempted assault with a deadly weapon. We'll sort out the marriage annulment business back in town. As the deputies hauled Richard away, still dazed from Sam's punch, Mrs. Henley approached Kate with a warm smile. You look good, my dear. Happy. I was right about Colorado agreeing with you. Kate threw her arms around the older woman, tears streaming down her face. I can't believe you did all this for me. Sometimes we have to be our own cavalry, Mrs. Henley replied. But sometimes, if we're very lucky, the cavalry arrives just when we need it most. As the dust settled and the last of the horses disappeared down the mountain trail, Kate found herself alone with Sam on their porch once again. But everything had changed. The threat that had haunted her dreams was gone. Her freedom was legally secured, and the man beside her had proven willing to fight for her without expecting ownership in return. So, Sam said quietly, what happens now? Kate looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the partner who'd offered her sanctuary, but the man who'd stood between her and danger without hesitation, who'd fought for her freedom rather than her surrender. Now, she said, reaching for his hand, I choose you. Not because I have to, not because I'm afraid, but because I want to. Because you're the only man I've ever met who understood that love means setting someone free to love you back. Sam's smile was like sunrise over the mountains. Kate Fletcher, are you proposing to me? Again? Samuel Fletcher, I'm proposing that we start over, as equals who choose each other every day, not as strangers bound by legal documents and desperate circumstances. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't the respectful partnership kiss of their wedding ceremony. It was the kiss of a man claiming the woman who'd chosen him freely, and a woman finally brave enough to give her heart to someone who deserved it. Kate Fletcher had learned that freedom wasn't about being alone. It was about being with someone who loved her enough to let her be free. 3 months later, Kate Fletcher stood in the garden behind their ranch house, watching the sun set over the Colorado mountains while dinner cooked on the stove inside. The annulment had been finalized 6 weeks ago, making her legally free for the first time in her adult life. The marriage that followed, their real marriage, had been everything the first ceremony hadn't been. A true choice made by 2 people who knew exactly what they were promising each other. Mrs. Fletcher, Sam's voice came from behind her, warm with affection and gentle teasing. Are you planning to let that stew burn while you commune with the mountains? Kate turned to find her husband watching her, with the expression that never failed to make her heart skip, part admiration, part desire, and entirely devoted. Mr. Fletcher, are you questioning my cooking abilities? Never, Sam replied, crossing the garden to slip his arms around her waist. I'm questioning your tendency to get lost in thought when you're supposed to be tending dinner. Kate leaned back against his chest, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. For months after Richard's defeat, she'd flinched at unexpected touches, but Sam's patient gentleness had gradually taught her that not all hands were meant to hurt. I was thinking about Mrs. Henley's letter, Kate said. She says Richard's been sentenced to 2 years for fraud and assault. His creditors seized everything, including the house. Good, Sam said without hesitation. He deserves worse. She also says 3 other women have come forward with similar stories about their husbands. Apparently, our case has inspired others to seek help. Sam pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Then something good came from all that pain. You helped other women find their courage. Kate turned in his arms to face him. We helped them. This wouldn't have worked if I'd been alone. You were never alone, Kate. From the moment you stepped off that train, you had someone in your corner. Sam's smile was soft but serious. The question is, what do you want to do now that you're truly free to choose anything? It was a question they'd been dancing around for weeks. With the legal complications resolved and Richard permanently out of their lives, Kate could go anywhere, do anything, become anyone she wanted to be. The entire world was open to her in ways it had never been before. I want to stay here, she said without hesitation. I want to expand the garden, maybe start selling vegetables in town. I want to learn to ride better so I can help with the cattle drives. I want to write letters to Mrs. Henley about other women who need help escaping. And, Sam prompted, sensing there was more. Kate felt heat rise in her cheeks. And I want to see what it's like to share a bed with a man who asks permission instead of taking what he wants. Sam's eyes darkened with something that made Kate's pulse quicken. Kate Fletcher, are you seducing your husband? I'm suggesting that our marriage has been missing some important elements that I'm finally ready to explore. What changed your mind? Kate considered the question seriously. I realized that I wasn't just afraid of intimacy. I was afraid of losing myself in it. But you've spent months proving that loving you doesn't mean disappearing into you. Sam's hands moved to cup her face with the gentleness that had won her trust. Kate, are you sure? We can wait as long as you need. I'm sure, she whispered. I love you, Sam Fletcher. Not because you saved me, not because I'm grateful, but because you're the first man I've ever met who made me want to choose love instead of settling for safety. When Sam kissed her this time, Kate felt something shift between them, the last barrier falling away, the final step from partnership to true intimacy. But even as passion flared between them, she felt no fear, no sense of losing herself in someone else's desires. Because Sam had taught her that real love didn't consume, it liberated. Later, as they lay together in the bed they now truly shared, Kate traced lazy patterns on Sam's chest while he played with her unbound hair. Any regrets? Sam asked softly. Kate considered the question. About Richard? About running away? About answering your advertisement? About any of it. No regrets, Kate said firmly. Even the pain was worth it, because it led me to you. I wouldn't change anything that brought me here. Even if you could go back and choose a different path, a safer one? Kate raised her head to look at him. Sam Fletcher, are you having second thoughts about your unconventional wife? Never, Sam replied immediately. But I want to make sure you don't wake up one morning wishing you'd chosen a different adventure. Kate smiled, struck by how well he knew her. The only adventure I want is the one we're building together. Growing old on this ranch, watching our children play in that garden, proving every day that love chosen freely is stronger than love demanded by law. Children? Sam's eyebrows rose hopefully. Eventually, Kate said, blushing, if you want them. I want everything with you, Sam said seriously. Children, grandchildren, 50 years of mornings like this. I want to build something so strong that no one can ever tear it down. Then that's what we'll do, Kate promised. We'll build a life so full of chosen love that the world will have to believe such things are possible. 6 months later, Kate Fletcher received a letter that would change everything again. But this time, the change was entirely welcome. Mrs. Henley is retiring, Kate announced, setting down the letter as Sam came in from checking the cattle. Good for her. She's earned it. She wants to know if I'd be interested in taking over her network, helping women escape abusive marriages, finding them safe places to start over. Sam paused in removing his boots. That would mean travel, danger, dealing with men like Richard on a regular basis. It would also mean giving other women what we gave each other, hope and a second chance. Sam studied her face and seeing the excitement there. You want to do it. I want to do it with you, as partners, using the ranch as a safe house, creating legal documentation for new identities, building a network of people who believe women deserve better than ownership disguised as marriage. Sam's smile was slow and proud. Kate Fletcher, you want to become professional criminals in the name of justice? I want to become professional liberators in the name of love, Kate corrected. What do you think? Sam crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. I think you're the most remarkable woman in Colorado territory, and I'd follow you anywhere. Even if it means turning our peaceful ranch into a way station for runaway brides. Especially then, Sam said, kissing her forehead. We'll call it Fletcher's Rest, a place where broken people come to heal and learn to be free. As they stood together planning their expanded future, Kate realized she'd traveled much further than the distance between Boston and Colorado. She'd journeyed from captivity to freedom, from fear to courage, from survival to true living. The mail-order bride who'd climbed aboard a westbound train with nothing but forged documents and desperate hope had become a woman who chose her own destiny daily. The partnership that had begun as a business arrangement had transformed into a love story that redefined what marriage could be when both people chose it freely. Kate Fletcher had learned the most important lesson of her life. Freedom wasn't something you achieved once and kept forever. It was something you chose every single day, and it was infinitely sweeter when you chose it with someone who loved you enough to choose your freedom too. Outside their window, the Colorado mountains stood eternal and protective, witnesses to love that had conquered fear, partnership that had triumphed over possession, and the revolutionary idea that the best marriages were the ones where both people remained gloriously, completely free. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories began with desperate escapes and ended with chosen devotion. Sometimes mail-order brides found exactly what they were looking for, and sometimes they found something infinitely better, a love that set them free to love in return. And so, in the Colorado territory of 1889, a mail-order bride learned that sometimes the most dangerous journey you can take is the one from captivity to freedom, and that the most beautiful destination is finding someone who loves you enough to let you choose them every single day. Kate Fletcher discovered that real marriage isn't about ownership or obligation, but about two free people deciding to build something beautiful together. Her story with Samuel Fletcher proved that the strongest bonds are the ones formed by choice rather than circumstance, respect rather than submission, and love that liberates rather than confines. Together, they showed us that sometimes the most revolutionary act two people can commit is refusing to own each other while choosing to belong together anyway. Their partnership became a testament to the radical idea that love and freedom aren't opposites. They're partners in creating relationships that honor both individual dignity and shared commitment. But Kate and Sam's story raises so many questions that keep us thinking long after their final sunset in the Colorado mountains. What happened to the other women they helped escape? Did their underground network of safe houses really change the way society viewed marriage and women's rights? And how many other mail-order brides found freedom instead of just another form of captivity? The themes of their story resonate powerfully today. In our modern world, how many people are still trapped in relationships that control rather than nurture? How many are searching for partnerships that celebrate their independence rather than demanding their surrender? Kate's journey from Catherine Morrison to Kate Fletcher represents more than just a name change. It's a transformation from someone who was owned to someone who chose to belong. Sam's character challenges everything we think we know about masculine love in the 1800s. His willingness to offer partnership instead of dominance, protection without possession, and love without control made him revolutionary for his time. What would our world look like if more people understood that true strength means empowering others rather than controlling them? The arrival of Mrs. Henley at the crucial moment reminds us that sometimes the cavalry we need most is other women who've learned to fight for each other's freedom. Her cross-country journey to save Kate represents the power of female solidarity and the importance of networks that support women's independence. What other stories could we tell about women who risked everything to help other women escape impossible situations? Richard Morrison's character represents the worst kind of abuser, someone who uses legal and social systems to maintain control over his victims. His ultimate defeat shows us that even the most entrenched power structures can be challenged when good people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. What other stories might we explore about corrupt systems being dismantled by individuals with courage and allies with resources? The legal complexities of Kate's situation also open up fascinating historical questions. What was it really like for women seeking divorce or annulment in the American territories? How did the law evolve to protect women's rights? And what role did individual cases like Kate's play in changing social attitudes about marriage and domestic violence? Kate and Sam's decision to turn their ranch into a safe house for other escaping women suggests an entire universe of stories waiting to be told. What adventures might they have had helping other couples find freedom? What dangers did they face from angry husbands and corrupt officials? How did their network grow and evolve over the years? We're also curious about the practical aspects of their unconventional marriage. How did they navigate the social expectations of their community while maintaining their egalitarian partnership? What challenges did they face as their relationship evolved from business arrangement to genuine love? And how did they handle the inevitable questions from neighbors who couldn't understand their unusual dynamic? The romantic evolution of their relationship offers rich material for exploration. Kate's journey from someone too traumatized to accept gentle touch to someone who could freely choose intimacy represents a powerful story of healing and growth. Sam's patient understanding and respect for her boundaries shows us what healthy masculinity looks like when it's focused on nurturing rather than conquering. Their future plans to help other women escape abusive marriages suggest a whole series of adventures we could explore. What if we followed specific women who found refuge at Fletcher's Rest? What if we told the stories of the men who learned to love without possessing, inspired by Sam's example? What challenges would they face from law enforcement and social authorities who preferred the status quo? The historical context also provides rich opportunities for storytelling. The American West was a place where social conventions were often challenged by necessity and isolation. What other unconventional relationships might have flourished in territories where survival mattered more than social approval? How did the frontier experience change traditional gender roles and expectations? Kate's transformation from seamstress to rancher's wife to advocate for women's rights represents a journey that many women of her era might have taken if they'd had the courage and opportunity. What other stories could we tell about women who reinvented themselves in the American West? What skills did they develop? What challenges did they overcome? What legacies did they leave behind? The themes of chosen family versus blood family that we explored in our previous stories continue here in a different form. Kate and Sam created a family based on mutual respect and daily choice rather than legal obligation or social expectation. How might their approach to marriage influence the way they raise children? What values would they pass on to the next generation? Tell us in the comments, what aspect of Kate and Sam's relationship do you find most inspiring? Is it Sam's understanding that love means freedom? Kate's courage in choosing to trust again after trauma? Their partnership in helping other women find safety? Or their proof that marriages can be built on equality rather than hierarchy? What other characters from this story deserve their own tales? We're particularly curious about Mrs. Henley's backstory. What experiences taught her to recognize and fight abuse? What about Sheriff Coleman, who seemed genuinely committed to justice even when it complicated his job? What stories might we tell about other law enforcement officers who had to choose between legal technicalities and moral imperatives? Here's something else to consider. This story took place during a time when women's rights were extremely limited, but Kate found ways to claim her agency anyway. What can her story teach us about finding freedom within restrictive systems? How might her strategies for survival and escape inspire people facing similar challenges today? The story also touches on themes of economic independence and self-sufficiency. Kate's progression from dependent wife to equal partner in a working ranch represents a journey toward economic freedom that paralleled her emotional liberation. What other stories could we explore about women who found financial independence in the American West? Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Stories for more incredible tales of love that liberates rather than constrains, partnerships that celebrate equality, and the courage to believe that everyone deserves relationships built on respect rather than control. But most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments below. What stories do you want us to tell next? Should we explore more mail-order bride tales with different outcomes? Follow Kate and Sam's adventures as they help other women escape abusive marriages? Tell stories about other unconventional relationships that challenge social norms in the American West. Your engagement helps us understand what themes resonate most powerfully with your own experiences of love, freedom, and the ongoing struggle to create relationships that honor both individual dignity and genuine partnership. What would you have done in Kate's situation? Would you have had the courage to climb out that window and board a train to the unknown? More importantly, what would you do if you met someone like Sam? Someone who offered you freedom instead of ownership, partnership instead of possession? Share your thoughts about the difference between love that controls and love that liberates. Tell us about relationships in your own life that have celebrated your independence rather than demanding your surrender. Help us understand what modern audiences want to see in stories about partnership, equality, and the ongoing evolution of what marriage can be when both people remain free to choose each other daily. Until next time, remember, the most beautiful love stories are often the ones where two people choose to be together, not because they have to, but because they want to, where freedom and commitment dance together instead of fighting for dominance, where love means saying, "You belong to yourself, and I'm honored that you choose to share that belonging with me." Kate Fletcher's journey from captivity to freedom reminds us that it's never too late to choose a different life, never too dangerous to seek relationships that celebrate rather than diminish us, and never impossible to find someone who loves us enough to set us free to love them back. Sometimes the most wanted people are the ones who refuse to be owned by anyone. Sometimes mail-order brides find exactly what they're looking for. And sometimes they discover that the greatest gift one person can give another isn't their heart. It's the freedom to give that heart willingly, joyfully, and without fear. Thanks for joining us in Colorado territory, where love conquered control and freedom found its perfect partner in chosen devotion. Now tell us, what impossible love story should we explore next?